Is the Sarasota real estate market quietly shifting back towards sellers? Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time for another Sarasota market update where I break down all the latest Sarasota County housing numbers and I explain what I'm seeing in the market right now and what those numbers actually mean for both buyers and sellers here in Sarasota. Real quick though, before we dive in, I'm Adam Waxler. I'm the broker and owner of uKeepCommission Real Estate, and I've been helping people buy and sell homes here in Sarasota for nearly 20 years. The best way to reach me is simply call or text me at 941-465-9206, or just click one of the links in the description below to get in touch. Okay, let's get into the numbers. Here's the simple version. Buyer activity is up, inventory is down, and prices are holding relatively steady. Now, when you see those three things happening at the same time, that's usually a signal that the market is shifting. And in this case, the shift appears to be moving gradually back in favor of sellers. Now, I want to be perfectly clear here. 1 month of data by itself doesn't make a trend. But what makes April's numbers worth paying attention to is that they're consistent with what we've been seeing develop over the past several months. So even though it's early, there does appear to be a clear trend emerging. So let's break it down section by section so you can see exactly what's driving this. The first thing that stands out in the latest report is that buyer activity has increased, and it's increased across the board. Both closed sales and pending sales moved higher compared to this time last year. Now on the single-family home side, closed sales were up modestly, less than 1%, so essentially flat when you look at it that way. But here's the number I want you to pay attention to. Pending sales for single-family homes jumped 17% year over year, and that's a really important distinction. Pending sales are contracts that have been signed but haven't closed yet. So they tell you what's happening right now in the market, not 30 or 60 days ago. And a 17% increase in pending sales for single-family homes tells us that buyer activity is accelerating. Now, where things get even more interesting is in the condo market. Closed sales for condos jumped nearly 19% year over year. Now that's a significant jump. But pending sales for condos, they're up over 35% since last year. So when you put it all together, what you're really seeing is a market where buyers are active and increasingly engaging across multiple price points and property types. And that momentum is definitely going to show up more clearly in the next couple of months as those pending sales turn into closed sales. Okay, next is inventory. And this is the section I really want you to pay attention to, because in my opinion, this is the most important data point in the entire April report. Inventory didn't just tighten, it tightened significantly. Let's start with single-family homes. Inventory dropped nearly 33% compared to this time last year. That's a substantial decline, and as a result, we're now sitting at a 4.7-month supply of single-family homes here in Sarasota County. For context, a 6-month supply is generally considered a balanced market. Below 6 months starts to lean towards sellers. At 4.7 months, we are now in seller-leaning territory for single-family homes. On the condo side, inventory dropped almost 20% year over year and now sits at a 7.7-month supply. That level still technically favors buyers, but here's the thing. That gap is shrinking, and it's shrinking fairly quickly. So what's driving this inventory decline? Well, it appears to be a combination of two things happening at the same time. Stronger buyer activity and fewer listings coming onto the market. When those two forces work together, inventory drops, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Here's why this matters so much. Inventory is almost always the first domino to fall in a shifting market. Prices and competition tend to follow, usually by a few months. So if you want to understand where the market is heading, watch the inventory numbers. Now let's talk about prices, because this is where a lot of people get confused. Despite the fact that inventory is tightening and buyer activity is increasing, prices haven't moved dramatically. And honestly, that's normal. Prices are almost always the last thing to respond to shifts in supply and demand. There's typically a lag of several months before pricing really starts to reflect what's happening on the ground. So here's where things stand right now. The median sales price for single-family homes in Sarasota County is $490,000. That's up 4.3% compared to this time last year. That's a solid, healthy gain. On the condo side, the median sales price dipped slightly, but only by 0.6%. And it now sits at just over $337,000. So essentially flat with a minor downward move. Overall, I'd characterize the pricing picture as stable. No huge shifts in either direction. And this is the number I'll be watching most closely over the next few months. If inventory continues to decline and buyer demand stays strong, prices will respond. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Okay, one more data point worth mentioning, and that's days on the market. Homes are still taking longer to sell than they were a year ago. And I know that sounds like a buyer-friendly signal on the surface. More time to decide and more room to negotiate. However, over the past several months, days on the market has actually been decreasing. And again, when you combine decreasing days on the market with rising buyer activity and declining inventory, it does suggest the Sarasota market is gradually becoming more competitive again. Not dramatically, but gradually. So what does this all actually mean if you're a buyer right now? Well, buyers may still have opportunities to negotiate in certain areas and price ranges. But I also think some buyers are making the mistake of assuming they have unlimited time and unlimited negotiating leverage simply based on what the market looked like a few months ago. And we're already starting to see situations where buyers are losing homes because another buyer moved faster and better understood what was happening in the current market. That's not meant to pressure anyone. That's just the reality of what happens when perception lags behind the actual numbers. And for sellers, this is obviously encouraging news. Now, a strategic pricing strategy still matters, condition of the home still matters, presentation still matters. In fact, those things always matter. But improving market conditions and declining inventory could absolutely help sellers regain some leverage as we move deeper into 2026, especially if inventory continues to tighten through the summer months. And one thing I always remind people is that real estate is hyper-local. Conditions can vary dramatically depending on neighborhood, price point, condition, waterfront versus non-waterfront, condos versus single-family homes, and so on. So broad headlines only tell part of the story. But overall, April's numbers do point to a Sarasota real estate market that is becoming more active, more balanced, and if these trends continue, potentially more competitive heading into the summer. It doesn't mean we flipped overnight into a strong seller's market, but the signs are consistent enough that if you're planning to make a move this year, now is a really good time to get informed and get prepared. So, if any of what I covered today raised questions about your situation, whether you're thinking about selling your home, you're actively out there looking to buy, or you just want to sit down and talk through what all this means for you specifically, please don't hesitate to reach out. The best way to reach me is to call or text me at 941-465-9206. I'm always happy to have a straightforward, no-pressure conversation about where the market is and what makes sense for your specific situation. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next market update. I put these out every month so you always know exactly what's happening in the Sarasota real estate market. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.